Okay. All right. Today, part two, retirement rescue. We have the esteemed man, Desi Arnaz, over 3 decades of investing experience and currently a dedicated mortgage note investor. And we're going to gain some insight with some of Desi's 3 decades of wisdom, and he's going to lay it on us. And appreciate your time today, Desi.
Oh, well, David, it's a pleasure. I appreciate you having me on today. This is my favorite topic, so
Favorite topic. I can see it in your face. Mine too.
yeah.
Well, I'll just jump right into it. I was wondering if you could explain to my viewers some way people might be able to utilize funds, either if they have an IRA or an older IRA, and then maybe go
Mhm.
into a little bit explanation of a self-directed IRA.
Sure, sure. Well, Dave, here's something that for the longest time, I didn't have an IRA or 401k because I was a self-employed person and I just never set one up, right? When you're self-employed, you can set up a 401k for yourself, like a real estate agent can do that. And that's what I was. I was a realtor and an investor, but I never set one up. But I tell you what I love about them. I love the fact that when you have some sort of a qualified retirement plan, that's what they call them, right? A qualified retirement plan like an IRA or 401k or several other types, um, your money can grow inside that plan either tax-free or tax deferred, meaning you don't pay the taxes until years later,
Right.
as opposed to paying the taxes up front. And so either way, it's okay. It's certainly better when it's tax-free, but there's some options that are available for people that want to learn more about that. I'm not an expert in that space. I just know that it's a good place to grow your long-term wealth, right?
Right.
Uh, one of the things though that one of the reasons that I did not personally use it, David, was that I didn't understand it. My thinking on it was, what if I put money into like a retirement account, then I don't have any money to invest. As you said, I've been investing for more than 3 decades. Actually, now, Dave, more than 4 decades now. I've been an investor, and my biggest fear was not having investment capital, right? And so I felt if I tie it up inside some sort of a retirement account, I won't have the money to invest. And I didn't want my money in the stock market. And I know that most people's retirement accounts are invested in the stock market where it's at risk of loss. And I'm kind of loss averse. What about you, Dave? You lost adverse too?
I I've kind of lost confidence in the whole Wall Street investment avenue. I've seen my personal 401k go up, and then as far as it went up, it came back down, and even more than it went up. And I just
Yeah,
don't think you get that back that readily. As
yeah,
what I
yeah.
what I've
You
grown
don't.
accustomed to seeing over time.
Yeah. And so what I like to do now is I like to invest in an alternative asset class versus stock market. But your question was about the retirement, using a qualified retirement plan to do that. One thing that I learned about over the last 10 years is something called the self-directed retirement plan, right? So
Right.
you can actually, what that means basically is instead of some company like Charles Schwab or Fidelity directing where your money is invested, you direct it yourself. And this is completely legal under the IRS code. Now, some employers won't allow you to direct your 401k because they want to control that, right? They have contracts with these big brokerage houses. And those contracts say they won't let you invest your money anywhere else except through these brokerage houses.
Right.
But some companies will allow you to invest your money outside those brokerage houses. But those people that cannot, they have another option that we could talk about too. But for those of you that can invest outside the brokerage houses, what you'll want to do is you'll want to work with some sort of they call them custodians. That's what the IRS calls them. The custodian is the company that manages your retirement account on your behalf to keep it IRS compliant. Okay. And so there are several companies out there, a lot of companies out there that do that. but there's several that are really good that I work with on a regular basis. And I've weeded out the lesser quality companies, you know.
Right.
They don't invest your money for you. They hold your money, like your retirement account, your IRA, your 401k, right? They hold it for you and you direct it to invest in whatever you want to invest it in. There's only a couple of things that the IRS will not allow you to invest in. And I'll let them tell you what those things are, but real estate is amongst the things that you can invest in. Financial assets, like, of course, stocks you can invest in, promissory notes like I like to invest in, right? Mortgage-backed promissory notes, we can invest in those things. That's all um, okay with the IRS. And so what people need to do is they need to roll their money over. Don't withdraw it from a retirement account and then try to invest it in a self-directed retirement account. You'll get penalized for early withdrawal, but you can roll it over, right? You guys have all heard that term, rolling over my IRA, rolling over my 401k. You can roll it over, meaning you never actually touch the money personally. It goes directly from Charles Schwab or Fidelity to the new custodian. And then they literally just say, oh, okay, where do you want to invest it? And you tell them where you want to invest it. For example, if you want to invest, if they want to invest with you, Dave, they can say, I want to invest with David Frazier in his next real estate project. And the custodian will say, well, how much do you want to invest? They would literally say, you know, I want to invest $50,000 or 100,000, whatever it is. And they will wire that money over to you, David, after they've had a chance to see your paperwork to make sure that your paperwork is IRS compliant.
Right.
But other than that, it's pretty easy to do.
And I found even through my own 401k, you may not be able to withdraw your whole 401k balance, but there's probably a good portion that you can withdraw if you choose to. And some people
Oh,
may not know that. I believe you have to keep a certain vested amount with your employer, but there's a whole lot more that you can do besides keeping the whole thing if you choose to diversify into another asset, as you said, alternative assets.
wow. I didn't know that. So I just learned something here because I've never had a 401k, as I said earlier. I had a Roth IRA
Right,
account. But now that I'm 70 years old, you know, I've tapped into that and I've moved that over to something called a family dynasty trust, which is a
right,
whole nother conversation for a different episode.
right,
But yeah, so that's good news, Dave. And you know what else too? I know that a lot of people change companies from time to time. And
right,
what they don't understand is if they're at one company and they have a 401k with employer number one, when they move to employer number two, the 401k that they had with employer number one can now be rolled over so that it can be self-directed.
right,
And a lot of people sit there, they don't even do that. They just let it stay where it was. And of course, the custodian that has your money where it is, they're not going to call you and say, hey, by the way, did you know you could take your money out of our accounts and put it over to your own account? They're never going to say that, okay?
right,
Because they're getting paid to churn your money through their system. Every time they buy or sell stocks on your behalf, they earn commissions. So they're never going to say to you, you could do this yourself, ever, right? And
right.
so you've got to understand what your rights are. And so if people are sitting on 401ks that they had with a previous employer, David, I think that they should reach out to you so that you can help them get that money rolled over so that they can do this thing that we're talking about today, which is private lending.
Right.
And so that's the holy grail of wealth building, passive income wealth building.
And while we're talking about that, maybe you can explain a little bit about being a private lender, because I think people, they think right away, I think security is number one in their minds. Um, and the individual that you're looking at lending the money to. And I think the biggest thing is they want to know that those funds are secure and you're not trying to take them to the cleaners and you're doing business in the most ethical manner that you can, and that their money's secured by a physical asset. It's not like crossing your fingers and hoping for Wall Street to get you a better return. This is a return that uh, is constant, and you know what it's going to be going in. You know what it's going to be coming out. So you have that security, uh, that security blanket, I guess you would say, for that investment, or lending to somebody like me that can procure a mortgage note through the means
Sure.
that we do. And maybe you could just, explain a little bit about the collateralization, um, and help them understand that private lending can be a great way to
Okay.
diversify.
Sure. Sure. You know, the funny thing is, before I really, really understood private lending, and this is back in the 80s, I was using private lenders. We just didn't really talk about it that way at the time, right? I just called them financial partners or whatever, right? But I used to flip houses back in the 80s, David. I owned a Century 21 franchise at that time. And oftentimes, in the 80s, property prices were depressed because interest rates were so high, especially in the early 80s, right? So what was happening is I thought, wow, with these low prices of all these houses, I need to buy a bunch of these, as many as I can buy. Because when things are on sale, right, that's the
Right.
time to jump in. And so I started buying a bunch of houses. I bought 28 properties, David, and most of them I used some sort of creative financing. More often than not, it was financing that involved working with people that I knew at the time. Like
Right.
I remember one of my lenders, quote, if you want to call them that now. Now I call them private lenders. One back then, I just said, hey, one of my financial friends or partners was a firefighter, right? He didn't want to be a property flipper like me. He didn't want to learn all that stuff. He didn't know how to put together a crew. He never really built anything. And so, but he had a nice savings account. And he was like me at that time. He was in his 20s and he had been saving money because he had been a firefighter for a few years by then. And he just wanted to put his money to work. And so he got a chance to literally ride on my coattails and profit on my deals by lending me money. And then when I made my profit, I pay him back his money plus his profit, right? Which is called interest. When you're a
Right.
lender, the interest is profit. And so I was doing private lending even in the 80s, even though it was not a popular thing and people were not calling it that. But today it's a thing. It's a real thing. And what it basically is this, David. A person that has access to some money, it could be inside their retirement account, the qualified plan, it could just be in their bank, right? Wherever it is. They have an opportunity to put that money to work. Oftentimes we let money sit in bank accounts and just sit there, or we let money sit in equity in properties, right? Let's say we have a little rental house and we paid that darn thing off. We own it outright. Well, that's equity sitting there that could actually be working for you too.
Right.
But let's just say it's a savings account. Let's say you have some money in a savings account. Rather than let it sit there, why not put that money to work? I think of money these days as little slaves, and my slaves need to be working 7 days a week. The
Right.
good thing about money is it never gets tired, never takes a vacation. Okay, no days off, right? It keeps working. And so, as a private lender, you get to keep your money working and you get to make money on projects that you personally could never pull off, right? Maybe
Right.
you don't know how to build. Like right now, I'm building a total of 1,000 apartment units in Florida, outside of Orlando, where Disney World is, right?
Right.
Um, but I have partners in that. I have private lenders in that scenario that are lending me money, and they're going to make profits from my deal, from my expertise, from my connections, from my efforts. They don't have to know a thing about developing apartment buildings.
Right.
I also buy a bunch of mortgages from banks and hedge funds, just like you, Dave. We buy these mortgages and these promissory notes from these banks. We know how to do that. We know how to buy them at a very good prices so that we make a nice profit on them, but we don't always have the liquid capital to do so. And so it's not unusual for me to make arrangements with someone who's sitting on some cash to say, hey, how'd you like a piece of this deal? Right? Here's the deal that I'm buying. And basically, when I buy a mortgage, for those of you that maybe missed our last episode, when we buy a mortgage, we become the bank to that homeowner or that property owner. They send their mortgage payments to us every month. Okay. Instead of sending it to Bank of America or some mortgage company, they send their mortgage payments to us. And we have their house as collateral. So if they ever don't pay us, then we get to foreclose and take that real estate. And the real estate, of course, is worth more than what they owe us. So if they owe me, for example, $100,000, the real estate might be worth $200,000.
Right.
So they don't pay me the 100,000, I get the $200,000 house. I can sell it at that point and recoup all my money and some of the profit on top of that. So anyway, that's what that's about. But if I didn't have the $100,000 to do that deal in the first place, after I've structured it, that's where a private lender would come in. So I could bring in a private lending partner, and they could bring in the $100,000. I've got the expertise, so they would be my lender. I would use their money to enter into that transaction. And every month, as I collect monthly payments from the property owner, I send interest payments to my private lender. So my private lender is getting these interest payments without having to lift a finger. They don't have to worry about anything. It's passive, completely passive. So if they're a firefighter, they just keep fighting fires. Don't worry about it.
Right.
And if I ever don't pay them, private lenders in the note space actually have double collateral, David. You know what that is? Double collateral?
Two different methods of security for your investment.
Yeah, double collateral is two different sources of security for your investment. So the first source for their security for their investment is the promissory note that I purchased from the bank,
Right.
and which is awesome, right? Because that gets recorded in the county, and so does my private lender's interest in that promissory note. It gets recorded in the county where the property is located. So that means nothing can happen with that real estate. Nothing can happen with that real estate without the private lender's approval,
Right.
which is really powerful, right? The second thing is, if I don't pay my private lender, then they have also the real estate as collateral. They can step into my shoes and start collecting the payments from the homeowner. If the homeowner doesn't pay them, they get that $200,000 house. So they have the collateral of the note itself, which I am paying them every month. Then they have the collateral of the real estate for the note that I'm collecting on. Double collateral. There's nobody else. I don't know of any other situation where a person's money is double collateralized.
No,
No.
That's, I mean, you can let your money sit in a bank at 2%, because I know we can beat those interest rates all day long. So it's just a decision. I think people
Yeah.
need to look at a viable decision to like diversify and do the math. If you let your money sit there at 2 or 3% versus double or triple that for the next 5 years, what are you going to end up with? Versus what aren't you going to end up with?
Yeah, that's so true. And I know that since this is a new concept for many people, there's more than the return that they're considering. For a lot of people, they don't know how this stuff works, and they're like, I don't even know how to become a private lender. How do I know if I'm lending on a good deal and all that kind of stuff, right? And so to that end, Dave, I am working right now on a private lender video training series. And it's just something we're going to give to people that want to become private lenders. There's no cost to it. And it's going to basically lay out, here's how you become a private lender. Here are the things that you want to do, right? You want to, for example, if you're going to be a private lender, you want to make sure that you always invest in something or lend to someone that's going to give you collateral. Collateral is something that you can take if you don't get your money back.
Right.
You don't want to just give someone a loan and then cross your fingers and say, I hope they pay me. That's not smart. So what you want to do is give them a loan. Sure, that's fine. But then you take something from them if they fail to pay you. And you can do that by just having the right documentation. And so in my training, I'll teach people, hey, here's the documentation that you need to get if you're going to be lending on this type of an asset versus that type of an asset.
Right.
So we'll help people with that. Also, we'll help people understand how to evaluate the risk that you, David, as an investor is taking. So if you're taking too much of a risk on a note, let's say that you're buying, or if I'm taking too much of a risk on a note that I'm buying, we show the private lender how to evaluate that to determine if they're comfortable with the risk that we're taking.
Right.
Right? Because at the end of the day, we're the ones that's supposed to be paying them back. Right? So if they're not comfortable with the risk that we're taking, they may want to pass on that particular investment. Say,
Right.
Dave, this one looks good, but it's not right for me. Right. And then they can pass on it and we can bring them a different deal to look at.
Right.
So
They have a choice. And, as investors, we have to be mindful going into a note with our due diligence that we're not, the security that we're investing at takes into consideration the worst case scenario. And if we cover that base, it's as secure as you'll probably find, an investment out there.
that's a good point, Dave. Very good point. Yep.
It's not something that we just throw at a dartboard and pick a note out of the hat. There's a lot of things, you take into consideration of property value versus loan balance. And when you invest smartly and safely, like you should, and do your due diligence, I think it's protected investment as you can get, honestly.
So Dave, it sounds like you're saying that before a private lender would lend you money, you're going to explain your deal to them in
Yes.
detail so they get it. Is that true?
Yes. Yeah. They have to have an understanding of what, they're getting involved in. I want them to understand. And
Mhm.
I think, I could sit there and try to explain the Wall Street investments to them, and that would never, I don't think that would ever come about because I don't understand them, but I
Yeah.
understand real estate, and most people understand it's a principal and interest payment, and a house is worth a certain amount, and uh, it's a much easier investment, I think, for most people to grab hold of than,
Yeah.
you know,
And I like too that, like, for example, with when you're buying a note, Dave, I know that you get a title report on the real estate, right? So that you know that the title is clear. If you see liens on the title, then hey, I need to maybe do some more digging or maybe just pass on this one, right?
right,
So you're not an idiot. You're going to be careful. And so the person that's investing with you has the benefit of your expertise and your training and your experience. And so they get to ride on your coattail, just like my firefighter friend did with me when I was flipping, 15, 20 houses a year. He made profits off of all my deals just by having his savings account invested with me in my deals,
right.
But this is even better. I think this is even better because of the double collateralization. I think about this too, Dave. Like let's go back to my firefighter friend. If at the time that I was flipping houses, my friend had invested with me, let's say he had $100,000 with me. If I drove off a cliff and killed myself, okay,
Right.
he'd have to step into that deal and finish that rehab to really protect his investment.
Right.
But he has no skill set in that area, right?
Right.
So when I think about it today, people who say, hey, I do private lending with real estate investors, I'm thinking, okay, I kind of get that. But at the same time, you need to understand what you're doing. If the worst case happened, you could wind up having to finish that project. And is that something you want? Versus a note. When someone lends you money on a promissory note, and let's say, Dave, I invest with you. Let's say I don't know a thing about notes or real estate. I'm just a private lender, and I invest 100 grand with you. You buy a mortgage on a $200,000 house, and those people are paying you every month, and then you drive off a cliff and kill yourself.
Right.
I have to now just start collecting the payments from that homeowner who was paying you. That's okay though. That's easy enough to do. Literally, it's a letter to the homeowner. Dear homeowner, right? David's dead. Pay me. You know what I mean? I know it's a little more complex than that, but not much,
Well,
right?
and
Not much.
we put the documents in place to alleviate that problem if it were to happen, because we cover that up front. Hey, if I disappear tomorrow, you have all the documents in place, the people to contact, and it's simply making a couple phone calls and providing your documentation.
And that's
It's
it.
pretty much that simple.
Yeah, that's it. It's pretty simple. We make it that way on purpose because who knows? We don't know what the
You
future
know?
holds. I could step out of my house tomorrow and get hit by a bus.
Yep.
I have no idea, you know? And so you're right, Dave. I'm glad you mentioned that because we do when we use, and by the way, that doesn't happen when you lend money to an investor like a real estate investor. They don't give you the documentation that you need to protect yourself in case they get hit by a bus and die.
Right.
You're going to be required to go through a legal process in a traditional real estate situation. Okay, because your interest isn't necessarily protected at the same level that ours is with a promissory note. We're in the paper business, they're in the bricks and sticks business. And so when the bricks and sticks are involved, there are different laws involved.
Right.
In the paper business, those laws don't apply. The bricks and sticks laws don't apply. Okay, the banking laws apply. And banks have influenced Congress over the decades so much so that everything works in their favor. If you haven't noticed that, by the way, all this financial stuff works in the favor of the bank.
Right.
And when you and I buy a mortgage note, Dave, we become the bank to that homeowner. And so all those laws that apply to Bank of America, Chase, Wells Fargo, now apply to us. It's really simple.
Right.
It's really simple, really smooth, really easy. And so those are the kinds of things that private lenders to you and me will benefit from that they wouldn't benefit from if they do private lending to the guy that's flipping houses, or the guy that's building a subdivision. You know, it's a whole different game when things go sideways. But
Well,
the returns are very similar.
right. I really appreciate your time. We're getting short on the hour, so I'm gonna have to wrap it up. But
Okay.
I appreciate your knowledge once again. Always a pleasure seeing you.
David, it's a pleasure to be here. I really do appreciate you having me on, and I sure do hope that people will reach out to you, David, and talk to you about your private lending options, because it's the kind of thing that they should look into. And if they decide to move forward with it, I know that they won't ever look back and regret it.
No.
And let me just say one more thing about it. It's also the kind of business, if you want to call it that, right? It's the kind of business that your kids and your grandkids will gravitate to. You know, as a property flipper, I can tell you personally, only one of my 4 children ever worked with me on a property flip. One of my sons did.
Right.
And he only worked with me on halfway through one flip. I was out there, we were in there, you know, putting in a new kitchen and working on this thing. And then all of a sudden he disappeared. He just never came back.
Right.
My kids were never interested in my portfolio of real estate because they saw how hard I worked at it. But my portfolio of paper, the mortgages that I own, the private lending that I do, because I do private lending too. When I have money sitting around and someone needs to borrow it, I lend it in a heartbeat. Okay. Right. They all want to learn that. And I've got children that actually work for me now and grandchildren that work with me, and they're learning this business too. So your kids, for those of you that want to build a financial legacy for yourselves, I can tell you guys, private lending is something that your children will gravitate to, even if their goal in life is to become a doctor or a firefighter or a teacher, whatever, because this doesn't interfere with that.
Right. And they won't learn that in school, I can tell you that.
Pardon me?
They won't learn that in school, I can tell you that.
No, they won't learn it in school. Teachers don't know it. If the teachers knew it, they wouldn't be broke, right? But anyway, David, I just want to share that because for me, creating a financial legacy for my family was really important. Right. And I know that I'm not the only one who thinks that way. And I just found this to be the best way to create that financial legacy, doing private lending. That's what I found. Okay?
I agree with you 100%.
All right, my friend. Thank you, David, for having me on today. I really do appreciate it. Well, and God bless you and your audience.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Desi. Until next time.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.